Yes, good evening everybody. I am at the moment an advocate, one of the advocates for Living in Love and Faith. I'm also the Assistant Director of Formation and Ministry for the Diocese and an Associate Priest in Cray Valley, just down the road. So I'm on home territory, which makes a huge change, and it's lovely to be here. So I'm just going to introduce you tonight in a short presentation to Living in Love and Faith. Living in Love and Faith is a resource that came out from the Church of England last November. It came out as a response from the archbishops when the synod decided not to take note of the report Marriage and Same-Sex Relationships after the shared conversations. And the archbishops decided that perhaps we could do better than that and wanted a different style of engagement. So this is not a report in the way that we usually get reports from the Church of England. This is a set of resources and a process to enable us to listen well to one another. We can move on, if that's possible. I'm really grateful to Duncan and the team for kind of uploading what I have prepared for you tonight. Thank you so much. We can move on again, Duncan. It looks at what it means to be human, it helps us to learn, and it seeks to engage the whole church. That really does mean the whole church. There are resources being prepared for young people as well as resources for people who are over 18. Let's move on again. This slide talks about the approach that Living in Love and Faith takes. So it talks about a learning journey. There is a course, in fact there are now 2 courses that we can do together, or you can do together in your parishes, to enable you to listen well to difference and to the different views that we have on these topics of relationships, same-sex relationships, and the whole breadth of relationships that sits within our understanding of sexuality. It's multidisciplinary, so yes, it talks about theology, yes, it talks about the Bible, but it also talks about sociological trends, it gives scientific information as well. It involves real-life stories, which are on videos for you to watch. You can download the whole thing and watch all the real-life stories which capture the whole range of sexuality I just talked about. And it looks at those different perspectives, it looks at different people's perspectives, it recognises those different perspectives, and it seeks to honour them. It is not seeking to come to a common mind, which again is quite unusual for something that has come out from the Church of England. Okay, let's move on again. So, Living in Love and Faith, this is an introduction, and if the technology works, we're going to watch a very short film which just introduces the whole set of resources and the principles for living in love and faith.
I do expect people to respect me, but I don't expect people to know what to do with me. Some people might never have met a trans person before.
Marriage to us means just a deep sense of commitment.
Being a Christian and being gay, I found a brilliant church. I don't have to hide anything about myself.
Living in Love and Faith is a landmark project which the Church of England has worked on for 3 years. It's a way of enabling us to think together about identity, relationships, marriage, sexuality, things that define the way our lives will be led. Living in Love and Faith is a library of resources. There's a book, there's a series of podcasts, there's real-life video stories, and there's a course.
Welcome to session 3 of the Living in Love and Faith course.
As part of the series, we'll be listening to people's life stories, welcoming people as they are, and seeking to see Christ in them.
Being Christians, we've got a view of marriage that just is important for raising family.
I was born with intersex traits. I would love to feel that I can be me along with everybody else.
My hope is that people will be open and courageous. Living in love and faith involves the whole church, and we encourage you to take part too.
Living in love and faith doesn't impose its views. It listens to different theological and biblical views and enables us to explore what God's will is for the church and to learn to live with each other.
You would have loved for somebody to treat you as they treat other people.
God has still provided. It just wasn't in the way that I expected.
My deepest prayer is that in living together in love and faith, we demonstrate the same love for one another as we have received from God Himself.
Thank you. We might just like to take a moment to think about any concerns or anxieties or fears you might have in engaging with a resource that talks about human relationships and sexuality in the context of the church. We will all have them, because it's not something that we are comfortable talking about, or indeed are very well practiced in talking about. And you might also just like to take a moment to think about, with this resource available, what might your hopes be for the church, for us as Christians, for that sign that John talked about that might be over Orpington, over our churches, over our worshipping communities. If we move on, and again, thank you. So what's on offer? Everything is available on the website to download, all the films and all the text materials. There's the course, and that's really the place to start. The course is 5 sessions long, and it looks at 5 different aspects of our relationships. It talks about learning together, it talks about identity, relationships, sex, and life together. And in the course, there are films, there's time for conversation, there's Bible study, and there's prayer. And the whole course is available to download. You can press the button and watch everything online. Alongside this course, there's a new course that's been brought out called the Pastoral Principles. And the Pastoral Principles give us a way of learning together. They are just, I've got it right. Thank you. I've gone off script. Thank you. So the Pastoral Principles give us a way of learning together. They ask us to address ignorance. When the bishop asked me to be the advocate for the diocese, I had to go away and do quite a lot of work. And I discovered that I knew far less than I thought I knew. So I had to address my ignorance. To also acknowledge prejudice. And we will all carry prejudices for all sorts of reasons, possibly from our upbringing or the way in which we ourselves have been treated. To omit I can't even say the word. Say it for me, somebody. Hypocrisy, thank you. To admit hypocrisy and the times perhaps when the church has been hypocritical about these issues. To cast out fear. Think about the number of people who are fearful of coming to church because they don't know the reception that they might receive. We might be fearful in our conversations because we don't know how somebody might respond to something we want to say. To speak into silence. We love silence. It's what we're kind of good at. But you know that silence when you're uncomfortable and you think, I don't like what's just been said, but I'm not quite brave enough to challenge it. And so that view gets taken to be the norm. So to speak into silence and pay attention to the way in which we use power. The Pastoral Principles course, again available to download, can be used in all sorts of situations, not just in thinking about these issues of relationship. And then there's the book, which is huge. This is the book. I don't suggest you kind of buy it and start at page 1 and work your way through. It's not that kind of a book. It's a resource book to supplement and to help you go deeper with some of the resources that you might find in the course. It's not a book that is written with a particular agenda in terms of wanting to get a point across. So it is a mix of materials, and it's written by people who have been on the enabling group, the working group that's put all the resources together, who again are a really mixed group of people coming from different sexualities and coming from different biblical perspectives. So the resources themselves seek to model what we're being asked to do, which is to honour difference, to listen well to one another, and not make prejudgments about one another. Okay, moving on, and moving on, and moving on. So this is the how. We talk about safe spaces quite a lot. On the advocates groups, there are advocates all in every diocese, and there was a conversation about not just safe spaces, but about enabling braver spaces. So spaces where we can have these brave conversations and perhaps talk about things that we wouldn't normally talk about in church contexts, or even perhaps amongst our friends. Living in love and faith enables those conversations to happen, and I am very aware that where people across the diocese have already engaged with the course, they have been so surprised at how it has gently enabled them to have those conversations. It's relieved some of those anxieties and fears, and it's brought hope. So we're thinking about brave spaces. We're thinking about increasing our knowledge on Christian teaching about identity, sexuality, relationships, and marriage, and perhaps having some of those views challenged, not to change our minds, but to actually go deeper in our understanding. The aim is that we learn together to listen to God. John spoke about listening earlier on, and also to listen to one another with grace. So if we move on again and again. Thank you. We're not going to do the second little film. So the process started last November and is continuing through until about January of next year. Now, obviously, you can do the course whenever you want into the future, but there is an ask at the moment that if we were to do the course, or if you do the course in your parish, that you provide some feedback. It's very short feedback, but you can provide feedback, and all of that feedback is our way of responding to this whole set of resources. So it's not so much about voting for something as about being able to respond. And all those responses are being gathered together, they are being analysed, and they will form a presentation that will go to General Synod next year, and then General Synod in the summer of next year will debate living in love and faith and the areas of human relationships, marriage and sexuality. So, yep, on one more, thank you. What we're being asked to do at the moment is to encourage participation. So you might want to do the course as a home group, you might want to do the course as members of the deanery synod, you might want to do the course with some friends, wherever you might feel safe to do the course. So that the course is on offer, both courses are on offer. We have chaplain, we have Joel Love, who is the Living in Love and Faith chaplain appointed by the bishop, and alongside myself as advocate, we have a consultative group of people which mirrors the national group that put the resources together. So the consultative group is a broad range of people with different perspectives from across our diocese. We could have interchurch groups if you wanted to do it as a Churches Together in Orpington course, you could. We can provide deanery study days and diocesan study days. Some of you may already have been involved in some of the taster days that we have had on Zoom. So just in summary, living in love and faith is a process, not a report, that enables us to have braver, safer conversations about identity, relationships, marriage, sexuality, all in the context of living well together, learning to live and love well together, to love in the way that Jesus loved us, as the Archbishop showed on that last clip of the film. And again, sorry, I'm running ahead of myself. So that just explains the process from now into 2022. And again, thank you. So it's an opportunity for you to ask any questions if you would like to about the process. I am very happy to run the course. I'm running a number of courses at the moment, some at St Benedict's Centre in Westmoreland and some in churches around the diocese, and I know other members of the consultative group very happy to come and support if that would be helpful. So opportunity for any questions or comments if you would like to make any. If not, that will be the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Can I just remind everyone on Zoom that if you have a question, if you type it into the chat box, Tim will pick it up and ask on your behalf.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just press the top button.
We have a roaming mic, but we've been told not to touch it because it makes a horrible noise.
Any comments or questions from anyone? Is that all crystal clear?
Well, there's no one commented on Zoom, so I thought I'd comment myself. I think we probably all in our churches have a leaflet somewhere which says welcome, it's welcome. And it probably all says we are a welcoming church, because it'd be very odd to say we're not a welcoming church. It's like people who write in reports, I'll give it to an appropriate person. Well, why would you give it to an inappropriate person? But I think we do need, in a lot of places, to look seriously at what we mean by that statement and interrogate it, and are we really a welcoming church? Or is there a clique of people who have been friends since the dawn of time, and in every opportunity they want to get coffee after church, they want to get and gossip with their friends, and people are left on the outside, not necessarily for any race or sexual or gender identity or any reason like that. So I think we need to almost start at the beginning and try and be welcoming to everyone. Because if we're not welcoming to the people who look like us, behave like us, how can we be welcoming to the people who aren't?
It's a very good point, and that's where this might be useful, really, really useful as a set of literary principles, which is what they're called, in the way in which we can talk about some of those issues. Absolutely. I think it's also it's worth remembering that while of course we are all welcoming churches, and I use we because I am part of you, we are welcoming churches, it's also worth just thinking about how people perceive church from the press, from the headlines that they read, and assume, wrongly, but assume that means us. So we have to work doubly hard sometimes to overcome that, and to make that welcome perhaps even more overt. But yes, I think you're right, Tim. It's good, and perhaps coming out of this pandemic is a really good opportunity for us to look at that wider issue as well. So thank you for the comment. Anything else? All clear? Yeah. There's a microphone on its way.
Yeah, thank you, Jane, for that presentation. It was very helpful. How would you suggest engaging people in our churches who might be very sceptical and even beginning to think about talking about these kind of issues in a church setting?
I would start with the films, if it was me. So if you go on to if you just type in Living in Love and Faith into Google and you'll get onto the website, you'll have to log on, but once you've logged in, you can access all the material. And there are some beautiful films. They've been really, really carefully crafted of real life stories. And I would start there because they are real life stories. And I think that's a really good place to start, because we're talking about relationships. We're not talking about something that's just theoretical. It's something that matters to people and it affects their lives hugely. So that's where I would start. And again, I think sometimes this course is a really good course to help people just to address some of that perhaps scepticism or fear without having to talk about issues that they might not feel very comfortable with. Having said that, those people who have done the actual course have actually been amazed at how gently it has led them through some of those topics in a way that really has been able to open up questions. It's challenged them, but it has opened up the opportunity for conversation that has been quite surprising, they have said. So that's where I would suggest people start. But it does recognise we all learn and absorb knowledge in all sorts of different ways. So the very first thing I did is what I told you not to do, was read the book, because it's kind of the default. But having done that, I would say, look at the films, just look at those stories, listen to those stories, and start there. Yeah. Thank you.
I had a couple of comments on Zoom.
I'm really sorry I didn't hear that, Tim.
A couple of people are saying it's an excellent idea. They'd be interested in being involved.
Oh, good.
But that's sort of another question. The substantive question says, not much mention of Bible teaching. How is this involved in the course?
Oh, really good. I'm really sorry if I didn't mention the Bible enough. So in the course, there's a Bible study for every session. So there's a Bible study there. There are Bible studies in the Pastoral Principles course. There are chapters in the book that talk about what the Bible has to say about relationships, sexuality and marriage, and written from different perspectives. And also on the website, there's a library of lots and lots of material that talks about biblical principles of relationship, sexuality and marriage from a whole range of perspectives. And that is a genuine range of perspectives. There's a danger, isn't there, in thinking, this must be going one way, and it might not be the way we want it to go, and therefore we kind of feel defended by it. But actually, genuinely seeking to see if we can find a way in which we can live with our differences, rather than upsetting one another over those differences. So there is plenty of biblical material. I apologise for not mentioning it.
Jane, may I ask you this question? What progress are you making among the under-30s? I think in the nature of the case, this is an issue which is most important for people under 30 years of age, who are setting out in life, who are wanting to form relationships, who are wondering quite where they sit in the great maelstrom of modern angst, in many cases, over these issues. What progress are you making among that age group, both here and, say, in London?
Thank you. Well, I can't answer for London. I'm just the advocate for Rochester, so I could only speak in terms of Rochester, and I can only speak in terms of the course. I think I would want to say two things. People under 30, maybe even people under 40, are just asking the question, why do you need to do that? Why are you doing this? It's almost something that, they think, well, we've been there, we've moved on, we've grown up differently. So issues in sexuality and relationships for us under 30, and definitely under 30 and possibly under 40 as well, is not the issue. We're more concerned about the environment, actually. So that's one perspective, and I think it's a really important perspective to recognise that younger adults actually have no difficulty with friendship groups and relationship groups that are quite different, perhaps, from our perspective, from the kinds of relationships that we were nurtured within. And that will be increasingly so, I think. There's some really good research in here about how younger people and younger adults engage in different kinds of relationships and how they move through those relationships. And I don't like speaking for younger adults because I'm not one. I think it's really important that they have a voice. What was this? There was another part of your question. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Sorry, yes. There is also, within the suite of films, there are some beautiful films with young adults talking about marriage and what marriage means. So there is a balance with all of that within those resources. So the films, and you saw a clip of them actually on that short film clip you saw. There is a balance of ages across those films, which I think help to engage with that. And there is a suite of resources being produced for younger people under the age of 18 as well. Yeah, Katie.
Yeah, so opening the dialogue in our various churches with our church backgrounds, sometimes not in open dialogue, with the worldview which our media are very forceful with. Again, thinking about how we bring the dichotomy of our generations, me being somewhere in the middle, from the younger generation that coming up and our, senior generations. How in your dialogues, because you've obviously not only done the studying, but you've also had to work in groups to be able to model this going out, how would you suggest people that potentially are going to lead to formulate these groups go forward?
Great question. At the moment, I've just been running the course with people who want to lead the course, to give them the opportunity to think whilst they're leading it what kinds of questions might arise, what kind of scenarios might arise, and how might we deal with those. So that would be one way of doing it, and really happy to do that. The other is, as you can tell from the suite of resources, the idea is that we do have mixed groups of people doing it, that we're not of the same mind, in all sorts of different ways. But that brings risk with it as well. And I think as a leader of a group like that, actually it's about making sure that you have kind of well set those parameters around listening well and speaking into silence, challenging prejudice, and being able to do that in a way that is gentle within the group. The first session is all about listening and how we listen well to one another and giving each other the space to listen well, and about being able to say that we might disagree with somebody's point of view, but actually we can still respect that point of view. So those would be the two ways I would respond to that question. It's a really good and helpful question. Thank you. I said earlier on, you can just click the button and go, and you can for all the resources, but that would not be a wise thing to do at sort of 7:30 on the day you're first leading the course. Obviously, you'd want to go through it all yourself first. And actually running the course for leaders in order to be able to then lead has been really fruitful in all sorts of ways. Anything else? I don't want to take up more of your evening than is necessary. So I think you're going to get the presentation, and there are a couple of other clips embedded. Please do go onto the website. There's also a page on the diocesan website for Living in Love and Faith. Joel, the chaplain, has recorded a film that's on that page, and I'm due to be recording a film, I think, later on this week to go on the page as well. And if there's anything else we can do to support the conversations or ways in which you might like to engage with this, please don't hesitate to be in touch. And thank you very much for your time. Thank you.